In 1950, you could snag a house for about $7,400. And it wasn't some tiny shoebox either. We're talking a full yard, real wood floors, and neighbors who actually knew your name. Today, that kind of money wouldn't even cover the down payment on a used shed in most cities. Fast forward to 1955, and a gallon of gas was just 29 cents. A $5 bill would fill up your tank and still leave you with enough change for a Coke and a pack of gum. And get this, you didn't even have to pump it yourself. A young guy would clean your windshield and call you sir while he was at it. The Chevy Bel Air hit the streets in '55 and turned heads everywhere it went. With its two-tone paint, chrome trim, and V8 engine, it looked fast even when it was just sitting still. Owning one wasn't just about driving. It was a statement that you were doing all right for yourself. In 1952, Mr. Potato Head made history as the first toy ever advertised on television. Back then, you had to bring your own potato to the party. The plastic spud came later. Can you imagine handing a kid a raw potato today and telling them to play with it? The U.S. population in 1950 was just over 150 million, which is less than half of what it is now. Towns were smaller, streets were quieter, and you could actually recognize most of the faces at the grocery store. It felt like a big country, but not too big. You didn't really lock your doors in the 50s. It wasn't because there was no crime, but because people trusted each other. If someone knocked, you invited them in. And if they didn't knock, it was probably just your cousin bringing back the ladder he borrowed. Nobody worried. It was just a different time. Sunday dinner was a big deal. It wasn't optional. The whole family would show up. Grandparents, cousins, and that one noisy uncle who told the same story every single week. We're talking roast beef, mashed potatoes, and that weird Jell-O mold that nobody really liked, but everyone took a scoop of anyway. It wasn't about the food. It was about spending time together. Drive-in theaters were at their peak in the 50s. You'd pull up in your car, hook the speaker onto your window, and watch a double feature under the stars. If you were lucky, the popcorn at the snack bar wasn't burnt, and maybe, just maybe, she'd hold your hand. The TV dinner was invented in 1953. It came in a foil tray, cost 98 cents, and promised a full meal with 0 dishes to wash. Families loved it, and nobody called it processed food. Back then, it was just convenient and kind of exciting. The first color TV went on sale in 1954, but they were super expensive, about $1,000, which is like $10,000 today. Most people stuck with black and white. When someone in the neighborhood finally got a color set, half the block would come over to watch. The interstate highway system didn't exist until Eisenhower signed it into law in 1956. Before that, road trips were a real gamble. You needed paper maps, extra tires, and a whole lot of patience. And if your car broke down in the middle of nowhere, you'd better hope you packed some sandwiches. Elvis Presley released his first single, That's All Right, in 1954. Some folks thought his dancing was scandalous, too much hip, not enough gospel. But for teenagers, he was electric. He didn't just sing. He shook up the whole country, one vinyl at a time. Milk came in glass bottles, delivered right to your front step by the milkman in the early morning. You'd hear the clink of the bottles and know the day was starting. And if you were lucky, your mom would let you peel the little paper lid off before breakfast. Every kid either had a red radio flyer wagon or wanted one. It hauled everything: toys, pets, groceries, siblings, you name it. And when it rained, you'd flip it over and turn it into a pirate ship, a fort, or a turtle shell. Imagination was the only upgrade you needed. The average American family had one car, one TV, and one bathroom. And somehow, everyone made it work. Siblings fought over the remote well. The dial and taking turns wasn't optional. It was just part of growing up. The average annual salary in 1950 was around $3,200. And guess what? That actually went a long way. You could buy a home, raise a family, and still have a vacation once a year, even if it was just to grandma's place. School lunches in the 50s weren't pizza pockets and chocolate milk. You got meatloaf, peas, a scoop of mashed potatoes, and a tiny carton of milk. And you ate it without complaining because the lunch lady looked like she bench-pressed sacks of flour for fun. In the early 1950s, television antennas started popping up on rooftops all across the country. Families would climb onto the garage with a wrench and a prayer, trying to aim it just right. One turn too far, and all you got was static. But when you got it just right, it was crystal clear. I love Lucy. Anyone? If your mom needed bread in the 1950s, she didn't check an app. She sent you. Grocery stores were small, neighborhood joints where everyone knew your name. You'd hand the clerk $1, get a loaf of bread, some milk, and change back. In 1950, most TVs had screens the size of a dinner plate and weighed as much as a small refrigerator. There was no remote, no pause button. If you wanted to change the channel, you had to get up, and Dad always made you do it. The first Waffle House opened in Georgia in 1955. It was tiny, cheap, and open 24/7. Truckers, teenagers, and early risers all found a home at the counter. It didn't matter who you were. If you liked waffles and coffee, you had a seat. In 1953, the first successful open-heart surgery using a heart-lung machine was performed. It sounded like something out of science fiction, stopping the heart, fixing it, and starting it again. But it worked, and it changed what doctors believed was possible. House keys were shared with neighbors when you went out of town. You'd give yours to the Johnsons next door so they could feed the cat. There were no alarms, no cameras, just trust. And maybe a pie waiting on the counter when you got back. Kids in the 1950s played outside. There were no phones, no tablets, no Wi-Fi. It was just stickball, bikes, and coming home when the streetlights flicked on. You knew every kid on your block, and somehow nobody ever got bored. Coca-Cola still came in glass bottles, and the vending machines only took nickels. You'd slide the bottle out of the cooler, pop the cap, and the first sip practically burned. It was cold, fizzy, and perfect. No plastic, no zero sugar, just the real deal. In the 50s, your phone was a rotary dial mounted to the wall. If you messed up dialing the last number, you had to start all over again. Long-distance calls were a big deal. And if the neighbor picked up on the party line, well, so much for privacy. You didn't need a gym membership in the 1950s. Chores took care of that. Mowing the lawn with a push mower, chopping wood for the stove, hanging laundry outside, and hauling water, that was your workout. And somehow, your grandpa still had better calves than you. Back then, you dressed up to fly. Men wore suits, and women wore gloves. Flying wasn't just transportation, it was an event. You got real meals, legroom, and smiles from the stewardess. And no one ever showed up in sweatpants or tried to bring a goat on board. In the 50s, a man's toolbox was a badge of honor. It was heavy steel, with no labels, just years of grease and know-how. You didn't throw things out, you fixed them. And if your neighbor's mower broke, you didn't call someone. You walked over and helped. Polio was still a real fear in the early 1950s. Kids were told not to swim in public pools during outbreaks. Then, in 55, Jonas Salk's vaccine came out, and it was like the whole country let out a breath it had been holding for years. If your family had a station wagon, you were living the good life. You'd pile in the back without seat belts, with the windows down and the dog drooling in the wind. Dad would be shouting over the radio, and Mom would be passing sandwiches back from a cooler. It wasn't fancy, but it was freedom. The neighborhood barbershop was where stories were told, hair was cut, and secrets were half whispered under the buzz of clippers. You didn't need Yelp. You needed Lou, the guy who'd been cutting your hair since Eisenhower got elected and still charged $2. There was no GPS. If you got lost, you stopped and asked for directions, and someone would actually help you, usually with a pencil and a napkin. You trusted strangers, and somehow they didn't steer you wrong just for laughs. When the ice cream truck rolled down the street, kids didn't just smile. They sprinted. Barefoot, with quarters in hand, they'd be screaming for bomb pops and drumsticks. No one cared about the sugar content, just that first bite, half melted, with the sun on your face and sticky fingers all afternoon. Back then, high school shop class meant you actually learned something useful. Welding, woodwork, engines, the good stuff. You didn't just graduate with a diploma. You left knowing how to fix a lawnmower, build a table, and patch a hole in the roof if needed. In 1951, the first nuclear power plant went online in Idaho. It didn't light up a city. It just lit 4 light bulbs. But it was the spark of something massive. America believed the future was atomic, and somehow that was both exciting and terrifying. Toasters, blenders, waffle irons in the 1950s, these weren't just kitchen tools. They were shiny symbols of progress. Everything was chrome, and your appliances looked like they belonged in a spaceship. And if something broke, Dad would open it up and fix it with a screwdriver and some grit. Back then, kids didn't wear helmets when they rode bikes. There were no elbow pads, no foam suits, just scabby knees and streamers on the handlebars. You'd crash, limp home, and your mom would slap on some iodine like it was holy water. And somehow, you survived. Television would sign off at night. Around midnight, the screen would go black after the national anthem. There were no late-night shows, no infomercials, just static. That was your cue to hit the hay, or risk Dad waking up and yelling, "Turn that damn thing off." In the 1950s, car keys were optional. Many pickups didn't even have a door lock. You'd park, leave the keys under the visor, and nobody would touch it. Today, you need a password to start your microwave. Back then, trust was stronger than tech. If you got sick in the 50s, you didn't Google it. You called the family doctor, and he'd actually come to your house with a black bag, a thermometer, and a look that said, "I've seen worse." And somehow, his presence made you feel better already. Penny candy actually cost a penny. Tootsie Rolls, Mary Janes, bubblegum all lined up behind the counter in big glass jars. You'd hand over 5 cents and walk out like a king. It wasn't just the sugar. It was the thrill of choice. At home, the thermostat didn't change much. You'd put on a sweater in the winter, open a window in the summer, and complain exactly once before Dad said, "It builds character." And you believed him because you didn't want to be called soft in front of your siblings. Sunday morning radio was for gospel and news. There was no scrolling, no playlists, just voices on the air and the sound of bacon frying in the background. Dad would read the paper, Mom would make coffee, and the world felt slow in the best possible way. In the 1950s, most milk, butter, and meat came from nearby farms. Grocery stores didn't need 20 brands of everything, just one that worked. And nobody asked if something was organic. It was? That's just how food was supposed to be. Cigarette ads were everywhere on TV, in magazines, even at the doctor's office. Some brands even claimed to be good for digestion. It sounds crazy now, but back then, lighting up was just part of life. Even your boss smoked at his desk. Kids respected their teachers, or at least feared their rulers. Discipline wasn't up for debate. You stood when called on, said, "Yes, ma'am," and you didn't talk back unless you wanted your ears boxed, and a note sent home, which you did not want. You didn't throw things out. You fixed them. Radios got new tubes, shoes got new soles, and toasters got rewired. There was pride in keeping things running, not because you were cheap, but because you could. And when something finally broke for good, you mourned it. A man with a briefcase and a hat was just part of the morning scenery. He'd kiss his wife goodbye, catch the 8:15 train, and work downtown. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. And every evening, he'd come home like clockwork, tired but proud. The Jell-O salad was in its prime. Lime Jell-O with cottage cheese, fruit suspended in mid-air like it defied gravity. Maybe some shredded carrots tossed in for texture. Nobody liked it, but everyone ate it because it was polite and, well, it was just tradition. When neighbors had a baby, everyone showed up with a casserole and a hand-me-down crib. There were no baby registries, no online wish lists, just people helping people. The new dad was expected to hand out cigars, and the new mom didn't leave the house for a week. Roller skates had metal wheels that sounded like thunder on the sidewalk. You'd tighten them with a skate key that hung on a string around your neck. And if your toe clip broke mid-ride, you'd walk home barefoot with bloody socks and a big smile. Every diner had a jukebox, either at the table or by the door. You'd drop in a dime, pick a number, and watch the gears whir to life. Chuck Berry, Patsy Cline, or Buddy Holly would come crackling through the speakers. And suddenly, the whole booth would be quiet. Paperboys were real hustlers. They were up at dawn, slinging heavy canvas bags over one shoulder and tossing papers with terrifying accuracy. Rain or shine, no excuses. And if you wanted to make money as a kid in the 50s, you didn't stream or sell candy bars. You delivered. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first satellite ever sent into space. It was the size of a beach ball and scared the hell out of America. Suddenly, the space race was on, and kids in the U.S. started hearing the word science a lot more at school. The average movie ticket in 1950 cost just 48 cents. For under $1, you got a seat, popcorn, and maybe a cartoon before the film. You didn't pre-book, you didn't scroll through trailers. You just showed up and picked whatever was playing, and it was usually great. In 1953, DNA stubble helix structure was discovered by Watson and Crick. Most folks didn't understand what it meant at the time, but it would go on to change science, medicine, and even solve crimes decades later. Back then, it was just a strange thing in a science journal. You could buy a brand new Ford F-100 in the early 1950s for under $1,500. There were no touch screens, no Bluetooth, just steel, an AM radio, and a bench seat wide enough to fit 3 grown men and a dog. And if you broke it, you fixed it yourself. The Korean War began in 1950 and lasted until 1953. Over 1.7 million Americans served. It wasn't talked about as much as World War II, but it changed thousands of families forever. For many veterans, it was a brutal, cold, uphill fight, and one they rarely spoke about afterward. Most American homes didn't have air conditioning in the 1950s. You cooled off with a fan, a cold glass of lemonade, and a nap on the porch. And if it got really hot, you slept in the basement. Nobody complained. It was just part of summer. Marilyn Monroe wasn't just a movie star. She was the movie star. In 1955, she founded her own production company, which was rare for a woman at that time. To some, she was a blonde bombshell, but behind the scenes, she was sharp, ambitious, and didn't play by Hollywood's rules. Most homes had one bathroom, and it was usually pink, mint green, or baby blue. The toilet, the tub, even the tile all pastel. And if you had 3 kids in one tub, bath night was a military operation. Oldest first, youngest last, same water. In 1958, the microchip was invented. At the time, no one outside a lab cared much, but it laid the groundwork for computers, phones, and just about everything we use today. Back then, people were still more amazed by the automatic garage door. American Bandstand debuted nationally in 1957, hosted by a clean-cut guy named Dick Clark. Teens danced in saddle shoes and poodle skirts while parents frowned from the kitchen. It wasn't just a music show. It shaped what cool looked like across the whole country. If you wanted to cool off in the summer, you didn't head to a luxury gym. You went to the community pool, if your town had one. The chlorine was strong enough to bleach your hair, and the lifeguards had zero patience. And somehow, every kid still did a cannonball right into the deep end. In 1958, the hula hoop hit shelves and sold 25 million units in 4 months. Kids spun plastic rings in driveways, parks, and schoolyards until they were dizzy. Neighborhood contests popped up overnight, and parents secretly tried it after dark, usually throwing out their backs with a smile. Homemade ice cream wasn't just a treat, it was an event. You'd pour in rock salt, crank that heavy metal handle until your arms gave out, and pray it set right. And when it finally did, it was the coldest, creamiest thing you'd ever tasted. Nothing from a store could touch it. Rock and roll didn't just appear. It exploded. Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Elvis, they didn't sound like anything else on the radio. Parents panicked, preachers warned against it, and teenagers? They cranked it louder. For the first time, music felt dangerous in a fun way. You didn't buy furniture from websites. In the 50s, you went to local department stores, sat on every couch, and probably got offered a cup of coffee. The guy who sold it to you lived 2 streets over, and if something broke, he'd help you fix it. McDonald's had just started franchising in the 1950s. The original menu had 9 items, including a 15-cent hamburger and 10-cent fries. There were no apps, no delivery. You'd walk up to a window, pay in coins, and eat your burger on the hood of your car. And it was perfect. House calls from salesmen were common. Vacuums, encyclopedias, brushes, you name it. These guys wore suits, smiled big, and gave live demos in your living room. Sometimes Mom bought something, and sometimes she didn't, but she always offered them coffee. It was just the polite thing to do. In 1959, Hawaii became the 50th state. For many Americans, it felt exotic and far-off beaches, volcanoes, hula skirts. Suddenly, postcards from paradise started showing up in mailboxes across the country. It was America's newest state, and everyone wanted to visit. Typewriters clacked away in every office, school, and home study. If you messed up, you'd use whiteout or just start over. And there was nothing quite like the sound of someone hitting their return, that loud ding and slide that meant they were in the zone. On Halloween night, kids didn't buy costumes. They made them. Old bedsheets, cardboard robots, sit on the face for a cowboy beard. You'd walk from house to house with a pillowcase, no parents in sight, just kids, candy, and a night that felt like magic. In the 1950s, TVs didn't come with stands. They were the furniture. Big wooden cabinets with built-in legs and speaker cloth fronts. When it broke, Dad didn't throw it away. He called the repairman, who'd show up with a toolbox and a cigarette. Men wore hats, not for fashion, but because that's just what you did. Fedoras, flat caps, even pork pies. You'd put it on before leaving the house, tip it when you greeted someone, and take it off indoors. It was automatic. No one questioned it. Women curled their hair with metal rollers and dried it under giant helmet dryers that looked like something from a sci-fi movie. Salons smelled like hairspray, perm solution, and gossip. It wasn't just about looks. It was a place to talk. In 1957, a little-known author named Dr. Seuss released A Cat in the Hat. It was written with only 236 different words to help kids learn to read. It didn't just become a hit. It turned story time into something fun, wild, and unforgettable. Postcards were a big deal. Every trip, even just 2 towns over, meant grabbing a postcard and sending it back home. They cost a few cents and carried a simple message, thinking of you. People saved them like souvenirs. Some still do. Bank hours were strict. If you didn't get there by 3 p.m. on Friday, you were broke until Monday. There were no ATMs, no apps, just a passbook, a teller behind glass, and the sound of that mechanical stamp punching your deposit into history. In 1955, Disneyland opened in California. Walt Disney himself walked the grounds on opening day. There were only 18 rides, and the park had major hiccups, including a plumber's strike and melted asphalt. But still, it became the happiest place on earth. School desks had inkwells. Even though most kids were already using ballpoint pens, the holes stayed anyway, like little fossils from the past. You'd poke your pencil through them during math and wonder how anyone ever wrote with an actual feather and ink. Church on Sunday wasn't a maybe. It was the anchor of the week. Families dressed up, and kids sat still, mostly. After the service, everyone would shake hands and head home for roast chicken. It wasn't just about religion. It was a routine that held the week together. Encyclopedias were how you looked things up. A salesman would come to your door with a full set of Britannica, and your parents would pay in monthly installments. If you needed to write a school report, that big shelf of books was your internet. In the 50s, lunchboxes were metal and built to survive a schoolyard war. Roy Rogers, Hopalong Cassidy, or Howdy Doody would be on the side, and inside you'd find a bologna sandwich, an apple, and maybe a thermos of milk. No one traded their lunch unless it had Oreos. The first credit card as we know it, Diners Club, launched in 1950. It started as a way for businessmen to pay for meals without cash. By the end of the decade, more folks were signing up and forgetting to read the fine print. In 1951, the first coast-to-coast live television broadcast aired. President Truman spoke from the White House, and folks across the country watched it happen at the same time. It was the start of a new kind of connection. One screen, one nation, one moment. Yard games were everything. Horseshoes, jacks, marbles, jump rope, and lawn darts, the metal kind. The ones that could skewer a foot if you weren't careful. Kids didn't need instructions. They made up the rules as they went and played till dark. Canned food was king. Spam, condensed soup, and canned fruit cocktail with one lonely cherry. Housewives stocked their pantries like mini fallout shelters, quick, cheap, and shelf-stable. It wasn't gourmet, but it fed a family of 5 on one paycheck, and a lot of casseroles. Bar soap was the default. Irish Spring, Lifebuoy, Dial, they all came in cardboard boxes, smelled strong, and lasted forever. Every bathroom had a washcloth and a mystery drawer filled with half-melted pink and green soap chunks that stuck to the sink like glue. Brownie cameras became wildly popular, thanks to Kodak. Anyone could afford one. Suddenly, memories weren't just kept. They were captured. Birthdays, beach trips, backyard BBQs, all in grainy black and white. If your finger wasn't in the frame, it was a great photo. Every home had ashtrays, even if not everyone smoked. They were glass, ceramic, and sometimes even built right into the furniture. Guests would light up at the dinner table, in the car, and even in the doctor's waiting room. Nobody thought twice. Smoke just came with the scenery. TV shows ended with a moral. Whether it was Lassie, the Lone Ranger, or Father Knows Best, there was always a clear lesson by the end. Be kind, tell the truth, and don't climb into the well. They were simple messages, but they stuck with you more than you'd think. If your parents bought something on layaway, it meant you didn't take it home right away. You'd make payments, little by little, until it was paid in full. There was no credit, no interest, just patience. And when you finally brought it home, it meant something. In 1951, direct dial long-distance phone calls became possible for the first time. No operator was needed. Before that, if you wanted to call across the country, you had to ask a live person to connect you. With direct dial, suddenly coast to coast felt a little closer. Car interiors were metal, not plastic. If you left your Chevy in the sun, the steering wheel could fry an egg, and the seat springs would leave stripes on your legs. There were no cup holders, no airbags, just raw steel, sticky vinyl, and a whole lot of attitude. In 1952, the first barcode patent was granted. It looked like a bullseye. Nobody had scanners yet, but the idea of machines reading products was pure science fiction. It took another 20 years to catch on, but it started with a doodle and a dream in a 50s lab. Most homes had one phone number, one corded phone, and zero privacy. If it rang, you ran for it. And if your teenage daughter stayed on the line too long, everyone knew. There was no voicemail. There was just hoping they'd call back. Sidewalk chalk wasn't bought in fancy packs. You made it with whatever white rock you could find. Driveways turned into racetracks, hopscotch grids, and masterpieces that washed away with the first summer rain, and nobody needed instructions. You just drew. Every town had a local soda fountain or lunch counter. You'd sit on a red stool, order a cherry Coke or a grilled cheese, and spin in circles while the waitress yelled your name like she'd known you for years, because she probably had. And that was it, a small glimpse into a world that feels both a lifetime away and strangely familiar. From penny candy to the dawn of the space race, the 1950s set the stage for so much of the world we know today. If you enjoyed this trip back in time, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories from the past. And don't forget to share which memory from the 50s surprised you the most in the comments below.